I struggle to understand why I can land in Paris, get on a train, and end up in Brussels. But if I want to move from Joburg to Gaborone, I must produce a passport. Who's the genius that came up with the scheme? You know, the Europeans are so quick to tell us that we can't bundle ourselves into a single block, but they've done it.
Vusi Thembekwayo is a South African entrepreneur, author, and a businessman. Recently, he was invited to a forum called The Platform Nigeria as one of the speakers. The South African man did not hold back. He decided to expose the Western countries and also charge the African youth to be smart and read between the lines. I want us to watch this video. I will be back.
I often hear young people today. Last night I was invited by a friend of mine who is from Ghana and he's in South Africa as well. So we went out for some dinner, spent some time with some young people. And I often hear young people today say things like this. You know, it's time for young people to rise. It's time for the old people to move out of the way. It's time, it's time, it's time. Let me tell you, young people, there is no old person going anywhere. If you want that seat in that office, in that boardroom, in that chamber, in that ministry, you're going to have to fight for it because power isn't given, it's taken. And so the question as our continent rises is, will we be men and women of courage? Will we be the generation in 50 years' time that our children reference and say, they did it right? They had the template for how to truly pull out of each other the ability to work with each other. And something fascinating is happening today. I must tell you this. This is the good news. The good news is that we're no longer separated. The good news is that we find each other. The good news is that in this room, there are people who are following Vusi Thembekwayo on Instagram. I know I'm very good looking on Instagram, I must tell you, I am very good looking on Instagram. But the good news is that even I have the privilege of following a Professor Lumumba's work. No matter where in the world I find myself, where there are Africans who are speaking, leading, evangelizing, and growing others, we now have the ability to find each other. The true question is, will we have the ability to build with each other? You see, to date, our building strategies all center on these borders that were drawn for us and not by us. And so it becomes the question of, is your nation thriving versus mine? I had this conversation with a friend of mine who also works in capital markets like me in South Africa. I said, I'm really confused by this feud we have with Nigeria. I genuinely don't understand it. Why do we constantly migrate to the global north and South Africa tries to posture against Nigeria and Nigeria against South Africans? What's the game here? What's the gambit? Whom is it that we're trying to please, and against whom are we trying to please them? Because each time we find our leaders playing that game, the question perhaps we should ask is, who is the master you're trying to please? In this moment and in this season, I think as a generation, we are called to truly understand what it's going to take, one and all, to work with each other, but to build with each other. One of the things in my mind that's missing in this season is a patriotic, flag-bearing, strong group, not only of men and women, but of Nigerians, who understand in the African context what Nigeria is. With the greatest of respect, I think in large part, the average is so distracted by internally what's going on. You're missing who you are in the global context of your continent. You're too worried about what's being said or who's japaying or who won the elections or what's next without thinking consciously about what you could do as an economy if Nigeria decided we're going to set the path for the rest of the region. As a consequence of this, absent of leadership, what happens? Everything that we have been seeing. And so the question for this moment, for each and every single one of us, is, will we be the courageous men and women who recognize the season we are in? I'm not sure how many of us have traveled to my country of South Africa. Any of you here? Hands up. When you do, and I hope for all of you that you do, which, by the way, side note, a conversation we must have, and Brother Pojo, I don't know how we do this. We need to convene the leaders of this continent to talk about this visa story. This is a disaster. And let me just say the following. I struggle to understand why I can land in Paris, get on a train, and end up in Brussels. But if I want to move from Joburg to Gaborone, I must produce a passport. Who's the genius that came up with the scheme? You know, the Europeans are so quick to tell us that we can't bundle ourselves into a single block, but they've done it. When you publish this, you must just leave that part out because I'm busy raising money from them. You know, I don't know. They're going to say he's too radical. And so, even in my own native land of South Africa, the work as South Africans we must do is to conscientize each other about the continent. In my mind, and I was listening to your comments, ma'am, about the youth service, I'm seized to understand and failing to understand why we are not deliberately sending young people into other parts of the continent. Experience the culture, live with the people. To come here, to be here in this beautiful country, I had to go through Ethiopia. From Ethiopia, I was in Zambia. So I went South Africa, Zambia, Ethiopia, Nigeria. Between now and December, I'm going to be in about 8 different African countries. In that same time, it's going to be easier for me to do 5 different countries in Europe than it will be to do 2 different countries in Africa. Less layovers, less time. I'm sorry, can we just pause? Just one moment, pause the time. Who designed this nonsense? Who wrote the script? I have a theory. And here is my theory. You only lock the vault where there is money. And so maybe there's a reason you've been kept out of that neighboring country. Maybe there's a reason you've been kept out of that neighboring region. Maybe there's a reason you can't travel to that other place. Because if you were to, there is something you might do that would help us build what we all know we are capable of. So first, keep them away from each other. Second, convince them that they're enemies with each other. And third, convince them that the other one is better than the other one. And before you're done, they will hate each other so much you don't even need to pass policy or law. And in the middle of all of this, here we sit as young people, fruitfully connected by the HTTPS. And we're more worried about what's trending and commenting on it rather than how do we meaningfully build with each other and do business. I came to tell you here today that I'm only interested in meaningfully building and doing business. I'm only interested in understanding how do we take the platform and put it in Johannesburg or put it in Cape Town. And how do we have not just this conversation here, but that conversation there? Because until and when Africa truly is of a single mind, it will continue to be the fodder and the meal for the rest of the global average. I don't know about you, but I would like a world slightly different for my children than the one I grew up in. So we must recognize then that our value to the world is cemented. And recognize beyond that, that even that very idea of what it is that is our value is changing. A week ago, I was in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. Today, I'm here. I make it my intention to travel the continent. Because, and on this point I will end with this. You see, it's easy for a politician to lie to you about Pan-Africanism when you've never traveled Africa. They can tell you their version of it because they've never been there. They will tell you how Africans speak even though they've never been there. Which, side note, why do Nigerians add O to everything? I'm sat at dinner last night, and this young man I'm with said something so profound. I was like, wow, that's so good. He said, please don't take my words, oh.
Wow. This is an interesting speech from Mr. Vusi from South Africa. I've picked few stuff from his speech. An interesting one. He first said, power is not given, power is taken. So it's about time African youth mesmerized about these quotes and realized the old people are not going to sit there or are not going to hand over power to us. No. That's not how it works. We have to work to gain power. We have to work to gain power. So most of the times, people will be sitting on social media complaining about leadership. My country leadership is this, my country leadership is this. But the whole question is, what efforts are you taking to make sure this leadership is not good? So we, the youth, can provide something better. So why don't we mobilize ourselves and present our leadership skills to places where we can take control of our destiny? That was a very good quote. He said, power is taken. Power is not given. Yes. And talking about the way people face difficulties, and Africans face difficulties when traveling to other African countries. He made a quote, said, without African minds becoming one, people will keep taking advantage of our resources. Or people will use Africa as their eating bowl. Without Africa uniting, the world will always take advantage of us. That's something we have to put our minds to it. I have said it several times here that Africans can do a whole lot of big things if we are united. But if we keep being separated, or if we keep being divisive, we are always going to face challenges. And remember, if Ghanaians face challenge, Nigerians will also face challenges. We are similar people. We are the same people. Just that they have created artificial borders to separate us. So the day Africa will come back together, will unite, that is the day we are going to witness the real continent of Africa. Only thing I can say is, let's keep on preaching the unity of Africa. Maybe my generation will not witness the unity of Africa, but in future, that can be possible. And Africa will see one Africa. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification button so that anytime I upload any great content, you will be notified. Thanks for watching.